Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So the last topic we're on of chapter 7, we're nearly at the end. So the wise seek and gain Brahman. So the operative word is that you seek that what is transforming you to that wisdom. So the wise go beyond the pairs of opposites. They recognize that truth is not limited to now. It's the same in the past, present, and the future. The deluded, which deluded opposite to wise, those that get involved in the world, get hooked up with the pairs of opposites. They get hooked up with what they like, what they don't like, the ups and downs of what's going on. Partly because perhaps they don't have any ideal goals or aspiration for something more universal. You might even play as though you have a goal for something higher. You might put that show on, but inside your goal is of interest, own self-interest. So that one who truly is striving for going beyond the pairs of opposites realizes that it's all just one play, lila, one game. It's beyond the pairs of opposites. So that one realizes it's beyond that. And it doesn't take much if you just step back for a moment in yourself and you recognize there's something in you. You might call it conscience, you might call it light, something burning in you, some light burning in you. And when you recognize that which lights you up, and you begin to look past your surrounds, or you begin to look past your fellow beings' likable or dislikable personalities, things that don't match with your nature, you begin to recognize they too have that same light. There's something common there. So in that, you enable the persons to understand they have their nature. Whether they understand you have your nature or not is a different matter. But you can exercise that. We all do things in accordance to our natures, the ups and downs. So not to get deluded by that, but to see past those layers of personality, or things you like, you don't like, with the understanding that we're all that same self, that truth, we're all the same. There's no differences. We're the same. Personality may appear with likes and dislikes, but understand each person plays their part to the degree they can or can't, but you've got to play your part. So in 27, O Bharata, the delusion of the pairs of opposites, that's what catches us. arising. Once we get caught up in that opposites, we like, we don't like, what we want to do, what we don't want to do, what we hope for, the profit or the, we don't want non-profit, we don't want no profit. We hope for to be honorable, to have a great reputation. We don't want anything sullied there. When you understand, you move beyond it, people will say negative things about you. People will. It's a reflection of their side. It's nothing to do with you. Maybe there is something negative, but you have to keep moving on to get out of the illusion. All beings are subject to the illusion at birth. The job is to get out of the illusion, to go beyond it. So there's an understanding that it's all paripurna. You are, we are full. But because we miss that sense of completeness, we go looking out everywhere. We want to change everything and everybody but ourselves. That flow of thought is a desire. We want to tell everybody that they should do it this way or that way. But you've got to check yourself first. So the desire causes the attachment, and the attachments cause that aversion of that ladder of fall. And that ladder of fall causes the suffering, and the suffering keeps us in the world. So if one can be just objective, that sakshi, pitched upon the self, remembering that self is in all the same, go beyond that personality of whomever you have to relate with. Doesn't matter if the person you're relating with isn't going according to your plan, you still have to move on with it. You don't get ups and downs by it. So raga dvesha causes the problem. When your likes and another person's likes don't match up, there's a clash. You want to have more control outwardly rather than inwardly. If we control inwardly, everything's possible. We try to control outwardly. One remains an impoverished pauper within. No amount of things outward will fix it. So it's getting rid of that imaginary void which we've created. Fixing the focus on the self. Call it what you want, the self, something within you which burns bright. There's something definitely within us. We know when we go back to that, it grounds us. But people call it different things. The same in you, in the terrorist, in the burglar, it's all the same. So move beyond those limitations. The hero, it's the same. The Christ, it's the same thing. So you've got to open up what is covered, remove those covers to see it bright. Meanwhile, you just examine what you're picking up, the like and the dislike. Examine. Do I need that? Can I leave that? Keep yourself on track. It's the vasanas which become the thought, the desire, the action. That creates more vasanas if it's not directed from the likes, dislikes. So we had a question. We were looking at the diagram last week in the book. which goes from sane to insane. It's a very practical diagram. You can, well, hopefully it's practical. You can, somebody used to use this in seminars, saying we're all somewhere in between sanity and insanity. Some of us will think we're more sane than others, and another person looking at you will think you're more insane than you think you're sane. So the question, Tim, if you can read the question.
Is a person who is totally impulsive insane?
I think the question is first, what is it to be impulsive? Might be, as in the diagram, that's what it refers to. Anybody? What's happening in an impulsive action or impulsive activity? Bhagavad, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the impulsive means when you react immediately to anything without even using your intellect to evaluate what to do or what to say, whatever, you're just reacting straight away. You're not using the discrimination because you're not using your intellect. You're just purely reacting as per your emotions.
Mm-hmm. Good. Mm-hmm. So, anybody else want to add? The question, is an impulsive person insane? Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, you had something?
I mean, adding on to what Babita said, it's basically the mind that is in the forefront when somebody is being impulsive. They give in to their likes and dislikes. And by doing so, on hindsight, they can be seen as insane, especially when working in a team or a group. They do things instantaneously without thinking through, and then realize in measure that what they've done may cost the team or the action or the activity. And therefore, people could, over a period of time, classify them as insane, saying, oh, they're very impulsive because they don't produce results. So in that sense, yes, but not in isolation of one activity. One wouldn't say somebody's insane. Somebody would just let them do it. A cumulative set of actions would classify them as insane in a relative term, not in an absolute term.
So we've got a graph here, sane, emotional, eccentric, hysterical. In fact, really, we should be asking what sort of activities are they which create that sort of behavior as well, I guess. Anybody else? Guru.
Apology, I'm relating this to, I think, the chapter 18, the action itself. So I'm thinking insane is probably a state where the vasanas directly determine the action. There is an element of daiva, the consciousness that's sort of absent in those actions which are considered insane.
Mm-hmm. Deva, explain Deva, just so everybody's aware of what you're saying.
Yeah. So an action constitutes 5 components. one of the key component is daiva, which is, I think, the consciousness itself. So it is, it's more of an observation of what you're doing, and it's a dispassionate observation of your acts, and that's what I think is daiva. It is considered to be the very life which actually enables you to be able to perform an action.
Okay. So they were consciousness, your consciousness. Okay, let's come back onto this graph. Yes. Okay, good. Okay, let's get a little bit more nitty-gritty in this diagram. What else can we add? Vidya.
I mean, I just wanted to say what Guru was saying about absence of daiva, that cannot happen because daiva is infinite. Consciousness is infinite. So when you say absence, you are limiting it to a finite. So it is there. It's just that it's just a witness, Sakshi Bhav, isn't it? It's the mind that is playing. It's our vasanas that's playing in the forefront.
I think, Guru, if I'm not wrong, were you meaning that a person's not aware of that at all? Is that what you're meaning? Because I appreciate what you're saying, Vidya, that it's always there.
Yeah.
But a person's not aware. So even an atheist is aware that there's something that they don't want to believe in. But a person who's not aware of anything but themselves, in that sense, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, apology. I think Vidyaji actually had the point. So I was thinking of this, insane is mere an act of vasanas directly dictating the action itself. But then the whole angle of looking at the action in a dispassionate way, which is, I don't know what it really is in our constituents of karma. But then that angle is missing. You don't probably kind of look at the action that you've been doing inwardly. You just get on with an action because your vasanas are dictating those actions.
So, okay. So it's impulsive. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, a person can be any of these at any time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination of things, and depending on the situation you are in and how you react, can be any of these.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Tim?
Where does intuitive fit in this diagram? Because many artists would say they're intuitive, not necessarily impulsive, but they're intuitive, which is close to being impulsive. Where does intuitive fit?
Okay. So that's not the question, but just briefly giving a bit of light on it. So the difference between being intuitive and impulsive is coming from the mind, in the sense that there's no reason logic, it's just straight off. Intuitive's coming from within you. It's already been digested. It's something within you which has something bigger in mind. It's spontaneous, so it could appear impulsive, but there's a depth in that of something bigger. Whereas impulsive is without any digestion, it's just thought. It's actually a reactive measure more than something which is coming out from within you. Intuition, which has already been digest it. You already know that. It's like a wisdom. You already know that, so it comes out naturally without any effort. It's there. It's effortless. Impulsive is without any thinking. It's not wisdom. It's different. So an intuitive person is going towards the other side of not insane, whereas an impulsive person is going towards wrecking things up. The difference is one is thought through already, it's a wisdom like element, and the other one is with a mind craving to grab something back. So it agitates one. Always keeps one in suffering, where intuition doesn't normally do that. But the action, outward action per se, might look similar. The intention's very different. Guru mentioned something that one's acting on vasana. You can have a vasana, good or bad. A vasana is just an unmanifest thought. It's when it comes to the thought level and whether you decide to entertain that thought to enable it to become a desire and action, and what direction you're taking it makes it good and bad. Not the vasana per se. Just wanted to make a note there. So it's your actual desire craving, your mind's craving, the lack of intellect. You can have a vasana which manifests, and you can decide not to act on it if your intellect's strong enough. But if it's not, you go full force into the like or dislike. No thinking. So what else on this? What would we say? Anybody think of somebody, something which we would call is insane? Who's insane? Vidya was gently expressing a team person who doesn't, but it's a little bit more than that. Maybe we would put them somewhere in the middle or another. It would be totally insane. Vidya?
You know, the story that you were talking about, where the man takes the boulder and goes up the hill and then throws it down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
He's insane, but he's insane on a different level. He's a detached soul. So
he's sane.
He is sane, but insane to be repeating the same task up and down again, in that sense, in a relative sense, I would say.
No. He's sane because he's got a logic and reason behind what he's demonstrating. The people who don't see it feel he's insane. Often that's the case. A sane person in society looks insane because they're not going in accordance to the norms of the insanity of society. Yeah. I hear what you're saying, Vidya, but let's examine it. A person who, if, say, a Christ came, everybody would think that person is insane because they can't understand why the person's acting without no motive for a bigger, greater peace. Because nobody's doing that. So they would be frightened of that person. All the authorities would want to get rid of that person. They brand that person insane because they want something which is sane. So make no mistake. All the great philosophers, something happens to them. Socrates was given a hemlock. Because of his sanity, he decided to take it rather than mix with the insane people. he was given a choice. So make no mistake, that's not insanity. So what is insanity? What is anybody have any example? What you might think off the top of your head? It's good to know in the gradation, so you catch yourself if you're going off track. Never mind what somebody else is doing. Catch yourself. Oh, I'm veering towards this. I better ground myself a little bit. Anyone? Jyoti.
Lack of control of your actions and thoughts. So when a person is angry, sometimes they can have lack of control, which becomes insane.
Mm-hmm. So lack of control of your desires, not getting your way, causes anger. So that could be moderately emotional. It could be eccentric if it gets a little bit more hysterical. Insanity. So lack of control on what scale? So just giving yourself some food to kind of picture your own valuation of how you grade things, to make you aware. It's good to sort of think on this. Babita.
If there is no logical explanation for your action, that can be considered as insane as well.
Mm-hmm. There may be no logical explanation. Okay, so I'm just giving you something, firing back. So what about if you're a bhakta? There's no logical explanation. You have an emotion for something bigger. So what basis? Yeah, you're not wrong, but think it through a bit more. Take it the next step. So you're right in saying that. So what else should we check along with that? What's the difference between a bhakta and an insane person? See, somebody sees a bhakta just devotionally, wholeheartedly following something higher. There's no logical reason. One might, if you're a jnani, you might think it's insane because you need to think. But it doesn't mean to say it's not okay. So what makes insanity?
I think as a result of it, what comes out, like if it is for like in a negative action or a positive action, or if it is causing harm to people,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, keep going. That's good. So it's just making you think. Good.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, when you hear the news, the gunman just goes into the school and just shoots down the children.
Mm-hmm.
That action is, you know, it's totally insane, because why would you just kill the innocent children? So,
Mm-hmm.
a bhakta doing his bhakti, he's got a reason for it. He's looking for you know, self-realization, his path on self-realization maybe. So he's devoting his action, but he's not causing any harm to anybody. So,
Mm-hmm. Okay. 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 Good. Take it further. So it's really we assess it. What's what? Tim, you had something?
I was just going to comment, I don't think this is a medical diagram. It's to do with people reading the Gita. And so I would come back to Guru's point that an insane person doesn't have the devam, the idea of consciousness in view of their actions. So it's the lack of that which makes someone insane.
Okay, so the lack of...
Because there can be very eccentric actions which are sane for that person pursuing the self, but to the outer world might appear insane.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
I think
Anybody?
Jyoti wanted to say something too.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say something. I was going to say something on the basis of what Tim just said. Society determine what is insane and sane. And something that might be sane to me might be insane to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So society might do that. Remember, there might come a Christ, we'll all want to kill him off or her off, whoever it is. That's what society does because of its own lack of evolution. But are we terming is that insane? That they may be insane to do that, but what makes sanity or insanity? One more, Vidya.
Just to counter what Tim said, lack of consciousness or lack of godliness, I would like to counter that because a scientist does not believe in godhood or consciousness, but yet he develops the vaccine for the greater good of humanity. So it's the selflessness that would then categorize when if somebody is sane or insane. So depends on the nature of action. If the action is self-centric and on a relative level, as Jyoti said, classified as selfish and for one's own purpose, then yes, you would look at it as an insanity, an act of insanity. Whereas a scientist, for example, the COVID vaccines were developed for the greater good of the humanity. Now, not all of them are going to believe in a Godhead or a consciousness, but still they're doing something greater for the humanity. So yes, I acknowledge there is lack of ignorance of the consciousness, but it's the intent of the action that would then define whether it's sane or insane. If it's selfless or unselfish, then there is a bit of gravitas you give to the cause or the action itself.
So they're at different levels. So at an absolute level, if you have if you don't acknowledge any consciousness, it's from an absolute level you say it's insane. But relatively speaking, the direction you're heading matters. It's not on it's not on outward expression. A terrorist could be thinking that they are doing something sane, but in actual fact it's destruction to the whole. It's intention in actual fact. When it's mind-led, it's heading towards the opposite, heading towards insanity. When it's intellect-led, when there's some reason or logic to something bigger, you're going towards sanity. Whether anybody else knows it or not is if you are able in your clarity You will avoid situations where nobody knows it and they will demolish what you have to offer, or what you want to share, or how you can serve. You'll not go there, because there's no point wasting your energies. Keep on your track. So let's anybody else before we move ahead? Guru.
Just had a thought on this. So the definition of sane and insane can be, at a societal level, this could really be different. And on a personal level, that could be different as well. So what I consider to be completely sane could be looked as an act of insanity to the outside world. If that's the case, in the context of Bhagavad Gita, I'm thinking this is not really related to the definition of how the society looks at sanity or insanity. It is more of a self-introspection. So it is basically asking us to make an assessment of our thoughts, our actions, being sane or insane, not from a societal perspective, I believe.
Yes.
To me, it's more like a psychology session.
Yeah, it is. The whole of the Bhagavad Gita is mostly psychology and some part of philosophy. But it's all intertwined. It's how the human mind works. Yes. If your actions, your perceptions, your emotions are of self-interest, mind-orientated, you're veering towards that emotional side which is disruptive, where you can't think of anything else but yourself, where you're totally dependent upon the world to cater to you. The more one evolves one's mind and intellect towards being unselfish, selfless, which is in focus, the more you'll become aware of that consciousness within you. Something in you is the same in others you identify. The more sanity, peace of mind you have within. The more impulsive, the more emotional, eccentric, hysterical, insane you become. The more discriminative on the pairs of opposites, your thoughts, to something bigger. The more you're grounded within, you keep that sanity. Tim.
Just to reinforce Guru's point, which I agree with, that this diagram uses very social terminology: emotional, eccentric, hysterical, sane, and insane. But it's really not a social diagram. It's one's personal view of oneself.
The whole of one's spiritual evolution is internal and personal. The expression of that internal evolution is that you are able to relate better with your world, so that connection is there in terms of how you internally develop yourself. If you are unhappy, or if you are with interest or insecure, you can't relate back with your world. So in that sense, personal it may be in terms of your own thoughts, perceptions, emotions, but your thoughts, perceptions, emotions are making your world a better place or a worse place. And the more potency or conviction you have in whatever you're pursuing, the more it's going to affect, good, bad, indifferent, your world, depending on the capacity. One Christ, one Hitler. The power, the power, but at opposite ends of the spectrum. In a sense, it's more complex than that, just generally speaking. So, yes, the whole of your spiritual evolution is not about what others are doing outside, it's what you are doing inside and how you relate to your world, which will make the difference. Which requires intellect. And spiritually speaking, subtle intellect. Growth of that. Let's go. Let's anybody, anything more before we, it's to figure it, think about these, think about it when you're emotional, where you're grading off, you're becoming eccentric, out of yourself, you're pushing something which maybe not covering a bigger picture, but more your own interest. You're hysterical. Think about the whole, how it maneuvers itself, and think about how you can maneuver yourself back into a position of grounded sanity. It may be tricky if you're in an emotional person, it may be tricky to keep yourself on path. It's like, how do you fortify yourself? It's practical. Be it psychological or philosophical, it's practical. Guru.
Sorry, Walji, I just couldn't help but I had to ask this last question. So at a subtle intellect level, can I still be selfish, self-oriented?
If you are cultivating your subtle intellect is what is that you're cultivating consciousness, something, a universality. So the two don't tend to go together. Yet, say for instance, you have a very strong desire, but your focus is on something higher. Your focus is on your own, you have within you that mumukshatva, that cultivation of something higher. You've got that, this is what I think it's about. I need to get onto it. But you have certain strong desires, which may not be the greatest of desires. With that in mind, with your subtle intellect focused, you'll get into those desires, but only with respect to get out of them as fast as possible. You'll be aware of that. This isn't so great, but I don't feel I've got any choice. So get into it and get out as quick as you can, because you know that it's not something universal. You know that it's got a selfish taste, flavor. So you want to, you can't help yourself. Get in, get out as fast as you can. And if you can think it through and not get into it, do that. But if you can't, get into it and get out. Measure it and get out as fast as possible. Be aware of it. But subtle intellect is always pushing you to get out of that selfishness. That's the growth of that. That's the idea.
So if I understand it right, Parvati, so gross intellect probably might still fuel some desires, whereas if at all it is at a subtle intellect level, it is always pitched on something higher.
Yeah. You can be an absolute master in this world of a particular vocation, but you don't think of anything bigger. You just so in that sense, there's no subtle intellect. So you may be great in your field, but you see people. Actually, remember that somebody I knew they were number one in their field of activity in it was in medicine, in research. But they're totally destructive in many other areas of their life. They neglect their kids, neglect always indulging in things which wouldn't help their health or anybody else. But quite depressive person, quite unable to communicate, relate in many ways. But in their field of activity, I'm not just, this is outward, we're not assessing, they could make articulate decisions about what was what. It was field of research, so they had to make, is it this or is it that, through their experiments. They could do it so that they were number one. And that helped people, incidentally. But the intention wasn't thinking. There was an element to think of something bigger, but the intention wasn't consistent. So they made certain decisions, made them number one, but they wanted to be number one for particular reasons. And in fact, that number one place soon wasn't number one. So subtle intellect's got to be available to know I and my, no self-interest. Keeps you number one, whether you want to be number one or not. You know, you might want to be quiet. So, the two don't go together. Doesn't mean that you're milling around lots of people with a powerful intellect, subtle intellect. You might be quite a recluse, or you might be amongst the people. That will depend upon each person's mental makeup. It's an internal thing. It's not about what the external expression is. But on the outside, everybody thought this person was the bee's knees. Internally, this person was a real mess. I know this person well, so I can say it. Subtle intellect is different than gross intellect. Let's go. 28.
येषं तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोहनिर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रतः.
Babita, if you could read the verse.
Verse 28. But those men of virtuous deeds, whose sins have come to an end, they, freed from the delusion of pairs of opposites, worship me with firm resolve.
So here he's talking about, in this context, the person who has got rid of their vasanas, those men of virtuous deeds, whose sins have come to an end. So they don't have vasanas, they've resolved the mass. They're freed from the delusion, the pairs of getting involved in the opposites and getting agitated. So free from sin. So what is our definition of sin? Anybody remember that? You got to observe this.
That causes mental agitation.
So if it causes you stress and mental agitation, then that's considered the sin. So one person's good action could be another person's bad action, and vice versa. It's relative. think I mentioned it before in the Tao Te Ching. It says a good man is nothing but a bad man's charge. That's all, it's relative. So free from sin is when there's no mental agitations. It's not what you do, it's that you don't have a reaction to it. It's not that you're cold, you just don't have any suffering to it. So this is often argued, but you know, the person could be callous, and if they don't, not affected, could be causing events which are not okay. But if you don't feel it, there's no sin in it. That's the difficult pill to swallow. Whereas the world doesn't see it that way. But here it's free from, there's no vasana, as it were. We don't criticize the tiger for killing. Actually, in fact, we don't criticize people who want to eat baby cutlets, lamb cutlets. It's okay. They don't feel anything. But if you don't eat them, you might feel something. You may not be able to eat that baby. But another person has no problem. They don't feel any sin. So, sin. Men of virtuous deeds whose sin have come to an end. Meaning there's no more agitation. They don't have any vasanas. So there's no wanting out of it. There's no friction there. There's no reaction in the sense of they don't get affected. Yes, they feel as an individual one way and the other, may feel good or bad, but they're not affected by it in a sense. Who worship me with firm resolve. So person is talking about here has conquered all their desires. When one is unaware or ignorant of one's true self, that enables a direction where you create thoughts and desires. But if your focus is always being directed to within the self, you slowly create a dynamic of a constant thought on that higher value, that universal value. There's a constant open eye meditation going on. So it's not without preparation. You can't just sit in meditation and expect all your desires to go away, as we've learnt in chapter 6. It doesn't just disappear. This is like one which has got rid of their desires. There's a constant focus on the self. They've dropped their desires to that last stage where then they're placed in meditation, place themselves there. So you got to go stage by stage. You can't just drop your desires. That agitation won't just go. It's got to be knocked off bit by bit, bit by bit. So you knock off the sins bit by bit. Something doesn't go quite right. Look at it from an objective perspective. If you're pitched up on something bigger, you let it pass quickly. You won't get into getting irritated by it. Observe yourself. Don't get irritated by it. Let it pass, move on. Doesn't matter if it was a real mess. Let's move. It's okay. Can make the biggest blunders, is fine. Just move on. If your focus is on something more universal, higher, you don't get upset by the trivial things. So you negate your world, you assert something more universal, that Brahman. That's the idea. Let's read the, Tim.
So a person who is freed from pairs of opposites would have little interest in the previous verse, which talks about being sane or insane. So we've moved on from the previous verse.
So, the actual fact, you see, it's say you were in. I'm taking an exaggerated value here. Say you were absolutely insane, but something triggered you inside to focus on something more universal. It's not likely that it happens this way, but say we exaggerate it, then the fact that you have started to look within on something bigger is the fact that you will make the difference between being the hare or the tortoise. Because you're on that journey. So once you establish that value to go within and look at something more universal, there's a possibility of the worst and worst can establish the truth far faster than the person who thinks that they are virtuous. So it's a matter of your consistency, your shraddha, your consistency of purpose. So really measure yourself. Where are you on that graph? And get moving to that subtle intellect. Spiritual growth is all about cultivating your subtle intellect. But you need an intellect to be able to make firm decisions, make distinctions between the opposites, to work through your vasanas and desires. To work through your desires so you drop the vasanas indirectly. On that, we'll stop. Anyway.
Thank you.
There you go.